Welcome back to the class on international business communication. We've been talking about different things. In the previous class, we started talking about organizational communication, and again, I repeat, many of you must be wondering why I'm discussing all these complicated theories in a class on international business communication. In this class, we will bring the concepts of communication and organization even closer to each other. And that is when I hope you will start realizing why I have discussed all these different things with you. So let's get into it. Let's revise a little bit. Before we move on, please discuss amongst yourselves, revise what organizational communication is and what the impact of managerial dynamics is on the communication patterns in an organization and vice versa. Now you'll say, you haven't told us about communication patterns, what do we know? This is common sense. I will tell you, but I would like you to just take this phrase. Communication patterns are the manners in which people talk to each other, the manners in which people discuss things each other. The horizontality or verticality of communication, the spread of communication would constitute communication patterns. So if you need some more explanation, this is what it is. But I will address these phrases as we go along. You'll say, what is managerial dynamics? Managerial dynamics refers to the manner in which the managerial functions move or evolve. So it is actually the happening part of a manager's job. What is going on? Why is it going on? How is it going on? All that constitutes managerial dynamics, and communication is part of that dynamics. Communication is part of this whole activity. How does all of this activity influence the communication patterns in an organization, and how do communication patterns, or how does the spread of communication, how do the channels of communication, the preferred channels of communication and the channels that are avoided in the organization influence what happens within the organization, how the organization is managed and administered. And that is what I would like you to discuss amongst yourselves, and then move on to the next slide. Okay, we were talking about structuration theory last time. We'll discuss this a little more now. Structures, as we said, are not static and definitive, but constantly in motion and contingent. So structures, by structures we are referring to organizations that have a well-defined structure, that have a well-defined shape. Structures also define what actions are appropriate, but the acts themselves as we perform them constitute the structures or the organizations. And this means that what we do in the organization influences how we talk about it. And how we talk about things in the organization influences how we do things. In a previous lecture, I was giving you the example of the word handicapped. People with different abilities. When I was growing up, we were taught that the manner, the word that is used to address people who are not like me or who are apparently different in some physical sense than me are handicapped. Now again, those definitions were at that point used. I'm not saying they were correct. Over time, these definitions changed. People started, communication improved, and with the improvement in communication, with a lot of other information, a lot of the information about people with different abilities doing things better than the so-called normal people started coming up. Just as people, any other person on the planet, people with a different set of abilities were also able to perform to the best of their abilities and make the maximum possible use of the abilities they had. And that is why from the word handicapped, they moved to disabled. Disabled meant lacking in some way, that was not acceptable. And then as things changed, as people came to know, these things had been happening in the past. People had been using a different set of abilities in the past as well, but the news did not get around. with an increase in communication, people started coming to know that there were different people, there were people with sets of abilities that were different than theirs. So people started, the word disabled then was changed to differently abled. Now the children who learn these words in school now are taught specifically that it is incorrect to address somebody as handicapped. It is incorrect to address somebody as disabled because they are not lacking in any way. They are differently abled. So the language has become more inclusive. What we saw in our environment influenced how we talked about the environment, and then how we talked about the environment made us look for other examples to support what we said. And when we got those examples, at that point of time, we started thinking in those terms. Yes, this word disabled is really bad. It's not appropriate. So we start using the word differently abled because I see in my environment, there's nothing dis about it. It is just differently abled, and I start thinking more inclusively, and then one thing leads to another. I talk about disabled here, and in another sphere I say, okay, inclusivity is coming into the picture. So when I talk about other things, I say, no, I cannot limit myself to this one channel of thought. I have to open my mind to other channels of thought because there is so much out there that I don't know. And so that whole, it starts a chain reaction in our minds. The same thing happens in organizations. The way we talk about our organizations, things become a self-fulfilling prophecy. We say our organization is very hierarchical. We start looking for signs that prove that the organization is hierarchical. Who makes it hierarchical? You and me. We make the organization as hierarchical. It is not inappropriate to address a person senior to us in age as sir, or a person senior to us in authority as sir or ma'am. But when we call somebody sir or ma'am, when they are not expecting it, what does it do? One, it could make them uncomfortable. Two, they could take it jokingly and they could say that, okay, I'm not knighted. This is what my professors used to tell me. I was never knighted. Why are you calling me sir? That was the way I was trained. Three, it sort of starts feeding back into the mind of the superior that yes, I am senior. Yes, you are senior. Everybody accepts that you are at a senior position. But when I say sir, the organization is, yes, you're senior, you have some more abilities. I have the ability to reach your level. When I say sir, the slant becomes more, the angle of the slant increases. So you're like, okay, this is what this organization is all about. Maybe people have very strict notions, very direct, clear-cut categories of who's higher up, who's here, who's here, who's here, and who's here. It's not a smooth line like this. It is more of a clearly well-defined step of hierarchy. So the organization starts becoming vertical. Or we say we are a very warm and welcoming organization. We are a very open-minded organization. We say this all the time. IIT is a very open-minded organization. It really is. And how has it become so? Because there are some people here, initially people from all backgrounds, all kinds of thought came in. They said, we want to give people the best quality of education. What do you mean by the best quality of education? Best quality of education means whatever we can find in the world, whatever best we can find. So we keep feeding it into ourselves and we say the world thinks that we are the best, so we have to live up to those expectations. And that is how this whole self-fulfilling prophecy cycle starts. It could be it could be for the better, it could be for the worse. So it could be vicious or it could be benign, and I prefer to call it a benign cycle because it helps improve the organizations. That is how, when we go back to the structuration theory, we say that the structure, the manner in which the organization is defined in turn determines how people talk about it, and how people start talking about it in turn solidifies that structure or redefines that structure. So it feeds into each other. Structure or organization is both a medium and an outcome of social practices. Duality of structure. So when we talk about the duality of structure, the structure, as we just established, governs how we talk about it. The structure governs how we communicate within and outside the organization, and it is also an outcome. It is also ultimately the structure determines what happens, and what happens in turn determines how we talk about it. So it's also a medium of defining structure. The structure and the medium ultimately becomes the outcome, and this is what is called the duality of the structure, as discussed by Anthony Giddens in Ross and Anderson. As discussed by Modaff and Devine. But then Anthony Giddens also talks about it in this book. Ross and Anderson have referred to the principles proposed by Anthony Giddens, and this is what they have interpreted things as. And Modaff and Devine, in a book called Organizational Communication, the name of the book is Organizational Communication, Foundations, Challenges and Misunderstandings. Again, they discuss the same thing, so I thought I will share that with you. Okay, organizational structure is not a concrete entity, but is produced as people interact on a daily basis, attempting to accomplish their individual collective purposes. That structure in turn serves to mediate and constrain future interaction. We define the structure in and through what we say about it, and that keeps solidifying. More people saying the same thing means it starts acquiring a shape. More people say we are a hierarchical organization, the organization becomes hierarchical. More people say we are a horizontal organization, we are not hierarchical, we are not hierarchical. And more people sort of catch on, it's more comfortable not being very vertical. So we become more open-minded, it just feeds into ourselves, and slowly, even if the organization was initially meant to be vertical, it starts sort of coming down. Okay, structuration theory. Again, talk and action are interdependent and should not be considered as disjoint entities. This is one of the main postulates of this theory. Speech acts, talk and corresponding action. We say when we start talking about something, we are initiating some sort of action. Saying that we are going to do something about it is the first step to doing something about it, and that is what the speech act theory is all about. When I say I will do it, when I say I will run, I've made up my mind, and then I'm saying it, and that is sort of, it feeds back, and that initiates the action. That's the very first point at which any action starts. So we call it a speech act. Okay, one of the speech acts is tool talk, which is goal setting discussions, giving of task and directions, and feedback about task performance. Tool talk is primarily directed towards getting things done. So it's primarily about the discussions regarding the achievement of the organizational goals only. What do we know needs to have? What do we need to do in order to achieve the organizational goal? And that is tool talk. So you give the task directions, do A, B and C, don't do A, B and C. You talk about task performance, and it is necessary for generation and implementation and evaluation of outcomes. And this is what we sort of fall back upon every time we want to see how far we progressed. The next type of talk that we do in the organization is the frame talk, which is talk about the context. When we say frame talk, we provide an interpretive context. We give the person we are talking to an idea of where we are coming from. This is my frame of reference. When we say that, then that is when we are doing the frame talk. This is where I am coming from. Okay. It is essential for the evaluation of tool talk in relation to the basic assumptions and values of the organization. It is important that you do things a certain way, but those things need to be done within a particular context with reference to a particular context. The next type of talk that we do is mythopoetic talk, myth and poetry, and it conveys the ideogenic ideas and images that create and communicate the nature of reality within which frameworks and symbols are applied. So this is the kind of talk that is, right out there. Meta communication, we talk about how communication is progressing, what we are doing, what is happening in the environment, where we need to go from a certain point, what we need to achieve, and all that is, it's part myth, part poetry, part dreams, achievable, but still they are dreams. We are sort of, lots of adjectives. This is what we should do, this is what we could do, this is what we might do, this is the ideal situation. All that is mythopoetic talk. It is not unnecessary. It helps us build a vision, it helps us start working towards a vision. If 10 people are saying that IIT is the best engineering institute in the world, those 10 people believe it, why shouldn't I? Those 10 people are able to work for 12 to 14 hours a day, and we have not more, we have a lot more than 10 people over here, lot more than 10 professors over here who slog day and night just to provide the best quality education for their students. So that is something that I can say as an insider. Anyway, but then it all started with a few people getting together. It is possible to do it. If I can do it, so can you, and the other person gets motivated. If 2 of us can do it, 4 more can do it. If 4 of us can do it, 16 more can do it. So it starts a chain reaction, but it's out there. Initially it's out there, it may be achievable, but then we sort of start believing in this dream. We attach a lot of flowery language, we attach a halo to whatever we say, and that is the mythopoetic talk. And so it communicates the vision and the ideology of the organization, and that gets people started towards working towards that vision or ideology. Okay, the next set of theories is called discourse-based theorizing. Now this is very, very important. This is where communication starts coming in. Please discuss amongst yourselves what discourse is. Please take out a dictionary, look at the meaning, Google the word discourse, and you will find universities built around this world. It's not just conversation. It is a big overarching realm of what conversations and interpersonal communication can do, and what this, how do conversations begin, how do they move on, how do they evolve, how do they end, all that is constituted, is a part of the word discourse. So we are building organizational theories about based on discourse, and this is where communication comes in. Communication and organization come together. Some of the concepts here are, the first concept here is organizational structure and the lives of organizational actors are inseparable. We believe this. We believe that the structure of an organization is dependent upon the actual lives of the people within that organization. When we say organizational actors, we are essentially referring to the employees in the organization, the people, stakeholders, and the movers and shakers in the organization, if you must. Now, I want you to discuss what the implications of these this might be in the context of international business, and how would this differ from for an organization that is, say, primarily rural Indian, and another organization that is a multinational organization based in a cosmopolitan city like Bangalore or Delhi or Bombay. How would this be different? How would the communication patterns be different in the organizations, assuming that the organizational structure and the lives of organizational actors are inseparable? Think about it, discuss it. Okay, the next thing that we believe here is organizations, just like conversations, begin intentionally but then take a life of their own based on the preferences, needs, opinions, cultures, and levels of mutual satisfaction of the participants or stakeholders, and then they evolve. Okay, so this is, again, all that I'm telling you today is from these two books, one by Ross and Anderson, the other one by Modaff and Devine. I find these two books to be very handy tools in teaching of organizational communication, and so whatever I've taken from there is really referenced here, and whatever, if I have come up with any insights, I've told you that. Anyway, so talking about organizations, just like conversations, organizations start intentionally. but then they take a life of their own. They evolve, they move on. Take the example of a newborn child. Parents have ideas in their minds, they give the child the best possible education. The child comes with his own set of genes, predispositions. The child goes out into the environment and starts dealing with things that parents cannot control. In the very first class, I think we discussed the paper by Squires, where we talked about contingencies that affect an organization, and this is pretty much like that. We can monitor the success of an organization, we can treat it like a machine, but because human beings are involved and every single person is bringing their own background into the organization, into the work of the organization, they are bringing they stay within the organization in their offices for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, but then they go back, they go out of the organization, they have their families, they interact with different people, and that is what in turn shapes the manner in which organizations evolve. It is mind-boggling. It is not simple. You can't have a straight set of rules that say this is what you can do, this is what you cannot do. It's nice to follow the rules. It is nice to have a set plan. You can put all the checks and balances you want, but the organization will evolve based on what the quality and quantity of the communication of its employees within and outside the organization, and that is pretty much what we are talking about here. All of these things change. What we hear from the environment changes our preferences for different things. It changes our needs, it changes our opinions. Now I'll ask you one more question that I have not mentioned here. What in the environment has a very, very strong impact on our needs, on how we perceive our needs? I don't need something today, but I might be craving it by the end of the week. What will influence it? Advertisements. Advertising agency rests on creating needs and fulfilling them. They create needs. So the advertising industry creates needs, and that is exactly, and how does that happen? Through communication. They keep sending you these messages. You have to have this particular brand of cornflakes. You just cannot do without it. So you're like, even if you've never tasted cornflakes in your life, you'll say, let me give it a shot, let me try it. They'll say, you just absolutely must have it. You know, so that is the kind of need they create in you. They'll tap into every possible craving that you have, and they'll say, well, this food can satisfy this craving and that need of yours. Hence, you need this particular brand of cornflakes. And you're left wondering, oh my God, how did I survive without it for so long? And that is exactly what happens with organizations. In and through our conversations, we begin with an intention. Yes, I want to make money, but how I make money will change with what my participants bring into the organization. And then it evolves. And then, you know, at some point we lose control over the shape that the organization is going to take, and we chart a new territory. That is why we have these evaluation meetings. That is why we have these annual reports to see what direction we should take next. Okay, what can affect this evolution? That is what I'd like you to discuss in class, especially in the context of international business environments. Okay, the last postulate here is organizations, just like conversation, need to be studied and understood locally, that is within their immediate contexts. And that is something that I have been focusing on right from the beginning. Communication, interpretation of messages is most effective if it is within context. We become effective communicators only when we understand the context of the receiver, the needs of the receiver, and send a message to the receiver to that we are appealing, we are doing our best to fit into the context that the receiver may be from. That is when communication becomes smooth, that is when it becomes effective. Okay, one theory here is conversational autonomy theory. Now, conversational autonomy theory essentially says that organizations are self-organizing systems. Communication produces, so they manage themselves and they monitor themselves. What does this mean? That communication produces organizations. This is the autonomous model in which organizations are seen as self-shaping. This means that organizations are not shaped by the interactions coming from outside. They are shaped by what happens inside. What is coming from outside does affect them. You'll say, then where does context go? Context affects what happens within the organization, but what happens within the organization is more potent for, this is what the theory says, that whatever happens within the organization as a result of the interactions on the outside is more potent than whatever is coming to the organization from the outside. We can't, an organization is not a loose entity. It's a very solidified, structured entity with very clear boundaries and demarcations. So this is what this theory says. Okay. Each organization creates its own internal coherence through conversations, and conversations are an interactive flow of discourse involving multiple participants in quasi-synchronized alteration of verbal and non-verbal expressions. Now, what does this mean? This means that every organization creates its own system of understanding things. It creates its own system of coherence, of being on the same platform, of alignment of comfort zones and understandings by its members through conversations. And how does this understanding come? It comes when the members communicate with each other, where multiple participants act together in a quasi-synchronized alteration of verbal and non-verbal expressions, when they interact with each other in and observe each other's verbal and non-verbal expressions and understand each other and come to a common understanding. That is when they start developing some autonomy over how they are shaped. The next point here is conversation creates organization because it presumes an organized and cooperative interpretation. Now this means that conversation, when we talk to somebody, it creates organization. It helps us bond with each other. It helps us give a structure to what is happening around us. It helps organize the chaos. This is what we had talked about earlier. It helps us organize the chaos in the environment. It helps us categorize whatever is happening in the environment because it presumes an organized and cooperative interpretation. We assume that an organization is able to do this because we are cooperating to come to a common understanding. We are working with each other to come to a common understanding, and we are equally able to classify the chaos, the mess of information, if I may say so, in our environments into easily identifiable categories and make sense of this information within those categories. Okay, next. Organizations operate as a result of a pattern of these implicit understandings that cannot be seen or heard clearly in isolated statements. Now, we are essentially saying here that what we are saying here is that organizations operate as a result of a pattern of these understandings, which means that we have developed these implicit understandings. We observe each other's verbal behavior, non-verbal behavior. We start understanding each other's behavior, and all this is implicit. I don't go and tell my boss, yes sir, I've understood what you just said, unless he asks me, unless he shouts at me and says, Aradhana, have you understood? And I say, yes sir, and tears in my eyes. No. But most of the time when he says something to me, it is implicit that I've understood where he's coming from. It is understood that I understand, he understands that I understand his point of view. Now we are talking about meta perspectives here. The boss, whoever is talking to me, knows that I can follow where they are coming from, why they are saying something, and what sense I should make from it. Okay, so organizations operate as a result of a pattern of these implicit understandings. These understandings are implicit. They can't be seen or heard clearly in isolated statements, but they can be seen and viewed within a context. Internal disturbances in organizations serve to maintain the organizations and facilitate the shift potentially into a higher and more creative level of functioning, which means that the disturbances don't necessarily need to be negative. They don't necessarily need to be perceived as negative. They help the organization evolve. Whatever we don't understand, wherever there is a mismatch in comfort zones, essentially helps the organization to evolve to maintain its status by coming back to status quo, and evolve by devising newer ways of dealing with these disturbances into a higher and more creative level of functioning, because we've learned to think out of the box. We've come across a new situation, we've resolved the issues using a new method of resolving these issues, and we have moved on to a better understanding of the same organization. Organizational culture theory, very important here. Culture, we've discussed culture a lot in the previous classes, so I will not go into the details of what culture means. All I'm going to tell you about now is what culture means in terms of organizational communication. And in terms of organizational communication, culture refers to the cohesive pattern of making sense of the world that characterizes particular groups of people in a particular time and place. So when we talk about culture, when we talk about organizational culture, we are referring to the patterns of communication that bond us together in that organization, that give us a sense of belonging within that organization. Again, you'll say, how is this related to international business communication? I ask you that question. How is this related? What can go wrong in the international business environment? What are the barriers that we can come across in an international business environment? We are coming from different cultures, we are working together, we have different goals, we have different intentions, we have different ideas, we have different ways in which we deal with situations. And all of these things, considering all of these differences, we have to come to a common understanding. We have to be able to talk to each other, we have to be able to establish relationships with each other, working and even social to some extent. Imagine, again, I'm straying a little bit away from the topic, but just put yourself in the shoes of a person who's working in an office, if you're not already doing so. We are spending 8 to 10 to 12 to 14 hours with a group of people. May not be the same group of people. You'll say, I have my own cubicle. What is the big deal? We are dependent on people, some of whom we may not like for various reasons. We are dependent on people, some of whose understanding may be more evolved than ours. We are not able to, they work much faster, they can think much faster than us. We have to work with people who have a different bent of mind. You could be very poetical and you could be very, very philosophical, and there's somebody else who's very, very cutthroat, analytical, thinks only in terms of numbers, and you have to understand the same thing in the same manner for the organization to work. And that is where all of this comes in. Unless you are able to communicate things within a person's context, we are not able to really get our message across, and the organization breaks down. And that is why we are talking about organizational culture here. Organizational culture refers to the above, which is the cohesive patterns, joint patterns, coordinated management of meaning, which is what we talked about in one of the previous lectures, in the context of a particular organization, specific roles, norms, rituals, and the storytelling practices that distinguish them from other organizations, even in their own industry. When we say storytelling, we are not talking about narrating stories to our children late at night, bedtime stories or all of that stuff. We are essentially talking about narration of commonly witnessed, experienced events. How do we describe a meeting? How do we describe an event that happened in the office? How will I describe a negotiation with another organization where we were able to bag a very heavy contract? So all those involve storytelling, narration, and we need to come to a common understanding of these storytelling practices. All of us do it differently, and the manner in which we do it determines how people understand it, how they make sense of it, how much importance they attach to it, what they do about it, if they are supposed to do anything about it. So it's all connected, and everything rests on what we say and what we write. That's all. That is where communication becomes extremely important. You could be experts at what you do. Unless you are able to say it in a manner that the receiver understands and accepts, in a manner that prompts the receiver to act on what you have said, whatever you have said is a waste of time and energy. That's the hard truth here. Okay, so coming back to organizational culture, we are referring to a cohesive pattern of sense making in a very complicated world. Specific roles. It involves specific roles, how we define these roles. Norms, when we say we are coming to work in the morning, does it mean that we have to clock in, we have to punch in our time at 8 o'clock, or morning could mean any time between 8 and 10? Some organizations give you that flexibility, some organizations don't. You say, I'm coming to work. Does it mean you're physically present in the office, or you are logging into work while sitting at home? Some organizations give you that flexibility. Rituals. All of us go to the faculty lounge between 10:30 and 11, and our attendant makes us a cup of tea. We sit, we chat, we discuss things. So, it's an informal activity, but that is a ritual that we engage in just to lighten the mood, and then we meet again at 3:30 or so, discuss things over a cup of tea, have a nice time, sort of vent, and just sort of bond with each other. That is a ritual in my office. I'm sorry if somebody feels offended with that. I've shared an inner secret of our office. Anyway, storytelling practices, how we describe different events. Now, in my profession, we are describing the typical storytelling that is going on these days is how our students performed on their examinations. We've just finished the semester. We are talking about how our students performed and how we should, what common problems are coming up. Different people teaching different subjects are facing similar problems. So either we are setting very tough question papers or we are setting very easy question papers. Our students would be able to tell you that, but we are discussing common things and how we describe this. And I say, well, I set this paper, it was not a multiple choice paper this time, and I don't know how to make sense of what students wrote. That is not what I said, but still, that could be one thing. Or I thought I was setting a very difficult paper, and did the paper leak? Why were the students getting up after an hour and a half when they were supposed to be working on a paper for 3 hours? Why did that happen? So, we are discussing things, and then somebody says, no, I noticed this happening. I noticed that this student seemed very, very focused on what he or she was doing, and there was another student who was constantly thinking about how to make connections. And so, this is the storytelling that we engage in when we discuss things in an academic setting. In another office, you could be discussing your negotiations. When I went and met with the client, this is what happened. Somebody else will say, when I met with a client in such and such place, this is what happened. So, you sort of have similar categories for discussing similar events, and that is what determines the organizational culture. OC stands for organizational culture here. Concepts in organizational culture theory. The first concept is emic knowing. Emic knowing is the understanding, more or less from within the assumptions of a cultural group, that you would achieve by knowing how an insider perceives it as a member. So, emic understanding or emic knowing essentially focuses on what I know, say, about the teaching profession as a teacher myself. Emic knowing is what I know about research, a social science research, as a social sciences researcher myself. What I know about IIT as an IIT faculty from the inside, that is emic knowing. What do I see from the inside? The next portion here is etic knowing. Etic knowing is understanding about an organization by virtue of its connections with the outside world. Again, this is from the book by Ross and Anderson. I know they are not the proponents of these theories, but this is what I am sharing with you. This is what I picked up from their book. By picked up, I'm not saying I picked it up. I'm giving them due reference for what they wrote, due acknowledgement to the original authors. Etic knowing is understanding about an organization by virtue of its connections with the outside world. So, taking the example of my position here, what did I know about IIT faculty before I joined IIT? What did I know about School of Management in IIT before I joined the School of Management? What did I think of the faculty? What did I think of the work of the faculty? What did I think of the organization? What did I think of my work when I was appointed before I joined the organization on the outside? These days, a lot of these pictures are floating on Facebook. I'm sorry, I just remembered that I could have shown you one of those where you have a set of 6 pictures and it says, okay, what my students think I do, what my parents think I do, what my colleagues think I do, what my children think I do, and what I really do. And so you have people in different situations. What I really do is what I know from the inside. What others think what I do is the ethic knowing. And these are some of the concepts in organization culture theory, where we have to bring these things together and look at things in context. Ethnography is studying an organization through immersion. Now this is something that anthropologists have been doing for a long time. Ethnography is going into a culture, being a part of the culture and studying it from the inside. People get married to people from a different culture just to learn about that culture. So, or you go into an organization, I want to know about teaching. I can study it as an outsider, or I can join an organization as a faculty member, learn about teaching, and then walk out and start talking about teaching, or do some research on higher education or on the lives of faculty members. But I first get into it, I become a faculty member, I interact with people, I spend a considerable amount of time here, I go through the motions of acculturation, and when I feel I'm totally confident, that's when I start talking about it as an insider. And that is the study as an insider. That is what is ethnography. Rituals are familiar activities members of an organization engage in with each other at regular intervals. Again, the one such example was this tea time that I was telling you about. It's a ritual. It is something we do. So 11 o'clock we all look at our watches and we say, chalo, it's time for tea. It's time to go and meet our friends and see what they're up to and discuss some common issues, discuss where they're going over the weekend. Will they be coming to the weekend movie that is going to be screened in our auditorium or not? So that kind of stuff. So it's a ritual. It's a familiar activity that we find familiar. Somebody on the outside will say, oh, you really watch a movie every weekend? And we'll say, yeah, one movie is screened in Netaji Auditorium every weekend, but somebody on the outside would probably find it very fancy. So it's again, we are familiar with it, we have familiar faces, we do it together, so it's sort of part of what we do regularly. Okay. Another concept here is performance. Performance is the attempt to manage identities in public. You have passion related performances. Before we go into that, this is the attempt to manage our different identities in public. Now, we were discussing about impression management, we were discussing about public face, we were discussing about public image. Performance is what we do in order to maintain that public image. When we talk about identities, we are talking about different caps, different hats we wear. I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a teacher, I'm a student, I'm a mentor to somebody, I'm a mentee of someone. So all of these things, I'm somebody's subordinate, I'm somebody's superior. So we are all doing these different things, and I'm managing these identities. When I come to the office, I have to behave like an expert, a superior, somebody who knows the subject. So I have to be working those things out with my colleagues, with people I interact with. Okay. Now, what I do in order to maintain this, or in order to make sure that these identities sort of blend in with each other, is I take the safest route out. For example, for any formal situation, wearing a sari is most appropriate. So if I wear a sari, I can wear it to all formal functions, plus informal functions where people have not seen me in a sari. They'll maybe smile at me, and then they realize that I'm just moving from one identity to the next over there. That is what I'm doing, and then I explain it to them. Normally I would come in jeans, today I'm in a sari because of this reason. Anyway, that is one thing. Or when if my father accompanies me to the office, for him, he uses my nickname at home, and he'll see me interacting in a different manner with him. But when he comes out here and he listens to people address me as Dr. Malik or ma'am or whatever, he feels differently than he would at home. And then I cannot change my interaction when I'm with him. I'm managing that interaction. Even when I'm talking to him, I have to appear slightly more formal. especially in front of my colleagues and students and peers, I cannot be as free and as informal with my own family when I am with another group of people. And that is the management of identity. That is what we say when we talk about, that is what we mean when we talk about performance. Now, again, coming back to different kinds of performance, we have passion related performances, where the primary function is to give workers' lives a dramatic interest that helps people adapt within a culture. So when we say passion related performances, these are the kinds of performances, this is the act we put up when we are trying to lure people into whatever we are saying. When we go for road shows, as we call them, to promote our management programs, we advertise, we create a halo around whatever we say, we highlight the positives about our organization, we create this big halo around the organization, we lure people in, we add lots of positive adjectives to whatever we are saying. So we dramatize the whole situation. And that is a passion related performance. I'm so passionate about it. When I really want to numb the senses of my students, I use big, heavy, fat words from philosophy of communication. Anyway, no, that's not what I do, but that is something that you can do. That is what you do when you make presentations about your organization. You come up, you look up dictionaries and thesauruses, and you come up with these heavy words that give the listener an impression that you're so passionate, you've spent hours and hours and hours, and if you yawn in the middle of the presentation, they'll know that you're so committed that you haven't slept all night, and so bonus points. Don't do it, it was just meant to be a joke. Anyway, that is a passion related performance. You know, everything is involved, verbal, non-verbal actions, everything is in it, and you're just sort of letting it all out. Okay. Sociality performances are maintenance of social roles and relationships within the organization. So this is what we do when we discuss things, when we have a social connection with our peers. This is what we do when we meet our peers for tea, casual chit chat. How are your children doing? How are your parents doing? How are your parents feeling? Congratulations on the award that your daughter won in such and such competition. Even if I don't like tea, I'll go to the lounge and I'll sit with my colleagues and I will have tea with them. Why? Because it's a social activity, we all do it, sort of helps us form connections. So this is a performance, it's an act. Given a choice, when I'm on my own, I may not have tea for 15-20 days or a month, but when I'm with my colleagues, I may end up having 3 or 4 cups of tea during the day. I'm just putting up an act just to belong. Same thing happens with smokers, I believe. Same thing happens with organizational behaviors. Again, you say this is social, but those social things help you tie in. Why do a lot of people learn to play golf in the corporate industry? It's not that they like the game. Golf is a very boring game. I enjoy it because I like, it helps. I mean, some of us like it, but most of us don't enjoy the game. It's boring, and you start and you should finish. I mean, you are expected to stay on the ground till you are done with the number of holes that you had decided to play. So you wait till the last tee. But why do people do it? Just to belong. That is a sociality performance, and it helps build connections. People you're playing golf with also know that you're doing it to impress them. Why do you go to take people to 5-star hotels and act as if you've been going there all your lives, and you nod and you smile at everybody, and the customer service professionals also know that you're putting an act, and they smile back, and yes, I know everybody here. Why are you doing it? You bond with this person. You assume that a person who's come with tons of money must be regularly eating at such places. So you sort of put up an act and you say, yes, even I am doing the same thing. That helps you blend in. You say, my organizational culture is similar to yours. That is how this whole organizational culture issue comes in. We drop parallels, and that helps us bond, that helps us create common comfort zones. Okay. Organizational politics, enacting or demonstrating power relations, who's helpful, controlling, regulative, subservient, etc. So we enact or demonstrate power relations, we decide who is where in the organizational hierarchy. So when we talk about organizational politics, we essentially communicate these things to each other. I want to have some experience in administration, so every time an administrative activity comes up, I will appear to be extremely helpful, extremely neutral. I could be boiling on the inside. I could be very angry about something, but I want to belong. I want to be perceived as a good administrator. I want to be perceived as somebody who knows what she's doing. So I will start taking in, I will start behaving as if I know what I'm doing. I'm in control of the situation. I don't get frazzled. I can monitor my students well. I can ensure discipline in class. If I'm with my colleagues, I want to be known as sociable. That time I will come across as helpful, even though I'll be thinking in the back of my mind, okay, I've helped this person today. What can this person do for me the next time? So all those things come up. Enculturation is another performance that we engage in. How new members are integrated into an ongoing social structure is another type of performance that we engage in. That is another, and again it is constituted in and through communication. This is something that we have done in the previous lectures when we talked about socialization of new members. Implications of the organizational culture theory. The first one is inclusivity. We belong, I belong, or prescription, more well-defined expectations from members and the organization. We are like this only, which means when I belong to an organization, when I follow the culture of the organization, the expectations from my behavior are more well-defined. People know what to expect. Because I am an IIT faculty, I will be well dressed and I will be very professional, and I will not let my emotions loose, and I will use big words in social conversations and all also, and I will look for a cup of tea with peers, so all of these things sort of help me get included in the organization. There are expectations. If I don't end up in the lounge at 11 o'clock every day, my colleagues will think, initially they'll be concerned, and then they'll start thinking that I'm too arrogant, and that will sort of not help me become a part of it. So it prescribes our behavior, it governs our behavior. Some theorists see it as a means to describe organizations as complex cultural achievements, and the other theorists want to use these concepts to diagnose organizational problems and intervene as managers and consultants to resolve these problems and improve these organizations. That is what people do. You know, there's a debate going on, again, varies from organization to organization, and varies, the intentions associated with these things depend on, vary from situation to situation. Couple more theories. One is the democratic participation theory. Organizations are seen as sites of power. The perspectives here are workplace democracy theorizing and feminist organizational theorizing. I've been given the time, so I will breeze through this very, very quickly. Workplace democracy theorizing. Voice is an important concept here. This was given by Cheney et al. In 1995, 1998, Dietz 1992, Eisenberg 1994, and Harrison 1994. I forgot to add, all this is from this book by Ross and Anderson. All these are mentioned in the book by Ross and Anderson, and due credits to the original authors. Learnings are taken in the book by Ross and Anderson, and that's where I took this information from. Voice is the willingness or ability of workers to state desires or criticisms publicly and to participate fully in self-governing relations. So, where am I coming from? Do I have enough voice? Do I have enough say in whatever is going on? That is the voice. Issues that must be addressed when planning for workplace democracy are: one is the support systems. What supports workers' social needs? What are the stresses that come as part of organizational transformation? How does the organization grow? Where is the voice of the people? What are the implications of for the participation of the members? Identity is negotiating the relationship between worker member identity and organizational identity. So that is another thing. Where do you draw the line? Revitalization is avoiding static organizational patterns, which means that we don't want to get stuck in a rut. We are moving. So we are trying to avoid whatever is already going on, and who decides which direction to move in. Managing competitiveness is balancing cooperation and competition. Where do we draw the line between competition and cooperation? Where are we collaborating with each other? Where are we fighting with each other to get ahead of each other? Implementing participation, which is coordinating self-direction with holistic goals. So, how do we coordinate where we are going with the overall goals of the organization? Dynamic communication is ensuring that diverse perspectives have access to each other. These are some of the issues that must be addressed when planning for workplace democracy. I'll quickly go through feminist organizational theorizing. Very, very important. I'll take half a minute for this. Please read this. Gender is conceived as something we do, not as something we are influenced by. And it does not presume that women are necessarily better organizational communicators. This theory also does not assume that men are necessarily trying to keep women out of powerful roles. It essentially assumes that it is especially relevant for male-dominated cultures, where these theories seek to highlight how power might be enacted in gendered ways that reduce the impact of women's voices. So please read this, and we will discuss it in a following class. We do not have time to go into the communicative organizational model. I would like to show you the questions that I would like you to discuss. What do you mean by discourse-based theorizing? What are the implications of the organizational culture theories in organizations? Again, based in rural versus urban areas, based in high context versus low context communities, having an equitable versus skewed male to female ratio of employees and organizational members, and how will knowledge of these theories help you in your training as a manager in the international business environment? Please think about these things, and we'll talk some more in the next class. Thank you.